everybody, and welcome to my show. This is Jason DaCosta. This is Consistent Preterism. Thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you. A little radio music for you. I wanted to play some country, but as I was about to hit record, the song ended and they started yapping and talking and not playing music. So I flicked it over to, 93.3, whatever it is, and got this little weird Ed Sheeran song on there for you. So I hope you enjoyed it. And today, I wanted to just take a little bit of time to address a very, very lame and pathetic argument. One that was reminded to me by a YouTube account named Israel Messianic Kingdom or some nonsense. And I just find that funny whenever there's the Israel Messianic stuff going on. There's some interesting beliefs and some wackadoodle concepts that are involved in that. But I checked the page, and sure enough, it is Joe Dirt Simpson. That's right, Joe Desperado. If you remember Joe Desperado, I roasted him like some carrots a few years back on the channel a few times. He was a full-blown IOer, had seen the light, was praising us, and myself included, made videos on it, defended it, and then somebody hurt his feelings in one of the IO groups, and so he, went batshit crazy and started trying to refute IO, because, that's always good, right? See the truth in something, see how clear it is, see how many questions it answers, get your little feelings hurt, and then come back and try to fight it. Never really goes well, only ends up, really torturing yourself, really, because that cognitive dissonance is going to be there until he takes his final breath. But yeah, so this is Joe Desperado's channel. It's laughable. He's got about -7 subscribers. I don't even know how that's possible. But yeah, so it's Joe. And so Joe is attempting to make the lame argument that many people do, that the Gentiles were allowed into the kingdom so that Ephraim could be swallowed up or could be gathered in alongside of them. In other words, God in his sovereign plan, this is Joe's view, and these other clowns, actually this is Jason Staples' view as well, to a degree, the scholar Jason Staples, whom I also shredded. They believe that God wasn't sovereign enough in this story. God wasn't all-powerful enough. He wasn't mighty enough. He certainly didn't have things in line or, down pat enough to preserve his chosen ones, right? To preserve them wherever they were, to watch over them, and to, basically kick all things into his sovereign motion to accomplish whatever it is that he wanted to accomplish, right? Now, if you think about that, that's really the whole tale in a nutshell, right? You look at this God and you say, holy cow, he's doing whatever he wants. He's all powerful. He's sovereign. He's all knowing. He makes things go one way. He, how does he say? He knows the hairs on the heads. He, determines the weather, right? He created the world, right? All these sovereign things. But yet they want to put forth the argument that God could not preserve his chosen ones, right? That's a little bit too far outside of the realm of possibility for this God, right? They'll accept the supernatural, they'll accept the walking on water, the raising of the dead, the healing of the blind, the parting of the seas, the floating up to heaven in a glorified angelic magic mushroom body. They'll accept all of that at face value without batting an eye, but as soon as you tell them that the ones that are being gathered in by the miraculous Holy Spirit superpowers, as soon as you tell them that those ones are actually the chosen of Israel, the seed of Abraham, the descendants that God preserved, oh no. That is where they draw the line, folks. That is just a little bit too stretched for them to believe, right? Sure, bodies can rise from the dirt. Sure, bodies can float up to heaven in magic mushroom bodies. Sure, there's people being healed by spit of their blindness. Sure, all that can happen. No problem. But God actually preserving individuals and fulfilling his promises that he made countless times in the Old Testament? No way. Just can't be. And so they want you to believe, these clowns, that God couldn't preserve or didn't know whose were his, right? And that just goes against everything the tale says, right? Because who here remembers at the very beginning when Jesus was kicking off this last day's mission, what did he say about these ones? He said he knew them, he knew where they were, he knew they would come, they would hear his voice, they would come to him, yada, yada, yada. He knew his sheep heard his voice, yada, yada, yada. So when someone argues that God didn't know whose his were because it was too long or too many generations had gone by or he lost track or, maybe he was too busy watching, I don't know, NFL football up in heaven, I don't know. But he lost track of his own, his chosen ones, the apple of his eye. He lost track of them. I usually like to kick them square in the gonads with the my sheep hear my voice, they'll come, I know my sheep, yada, yada, yada. Just to show them how ridiculous of an argument that is. Because, again, this story doesn't leave any room for that sort of nonsense. This story shows this God as being all sovereign, in control, knowing whose were his, right? And so, anyways, I like to show them that and tell them, no, bonehead, this cannot be, okay? This cannot be. The entire story shows that, no, God did not open it up for all Gentiles for the purpose of gathering in the random scattered elect Israelites out in the nations. No, that's not it. The story actually says that there was a elect, chosen, predestined, predetermined amount of individuals living in and outside of Jerusalem in the nations, and those ones would be sought after and would be gathered in. And they would be, they were lost, but they would be called back by the shepherd. And they would do so, they would accomplish this mission by the power of the Holy Spirit. And what's interesting is Paul in Romans 9 really just hammers down on fools like Joe Desperado and Jason Staples, right? In Romans 9, as Paul is asking the question, is God also having mercy upon the Gentiles, right? Because now remember the picture. We have individuals from both parties, Jew and Gentile, being called out, being fished out, being gathered out, right? Being brought back to the fold. We have individuals from both parties. So Paul is like asking, is God also having mercy on the Gentiles, right? We know the Jews he's having mercy on. That's clear, Jew first. But is he also having mercy on some of these Gentiles? And then he goes on and he quotes 3 passages all about Old Covenant Israelites. Scattered, lost Israelites. Israelites out in the nations who were not his people, but God would have mercy on, and they would be his people once again. But the passage that I really want you to take notice of, as it's relevant here, is the final one that Paul quotes. He said, unless the Lord had left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom and been made like Gomorrah. Now, folks, think about this. What is Paul saying there? Paul is very clearly saying that as he's asking about the identity of these Gentiles, he's asking about the mercy that's coming upon these specific Gentiles in these nations, right? And one could make the argument that the word is just nations, right? Is God also having mercy on the nations? And Paul goes on to answer that by quoting 3 Old Testament passages, just like the New Testament does many other places. But notice that he says, unless the Lord had left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom and been made like Gomorrah. So what seed is he talking about? What seed is he talking about? Unless the Lord had left us a seed, we, plural, would have become like Sodom. So he's speaking of a collective, plural body of individuals that the Lord had left in that day. Paul is applying that passage to that time and saying, unless the Lord had left us a seed of Israelites, we would have become like Sodom. So Paul is very clearly revealing that God was in control here, is he not? So what is Paul revealing there? Well, very clearly he's revealing that there was a seed, there was an amount, there was a predetermined amount of individuals whom in the previous 2 verses he defines as the children of Israel by quoting Hosea and Isaiah, right? Just go read it, Romans 9:23 and forward. It's all about Israel when he asks about these Gentiles who were receiving mercy. So again, Paul is basically saying in a nutshell that these ones that God had left in the nations, a seed of, were the chosen ones. Right? So Does it sound like Joe Desperado is correct here by saying that God didn't know who his people were, so therefore he had to sort of take the blue whale effect or the blue whale method and just swallow everything because he didn't know, exactly whose his were? No, that doesn't make sense at all. That's actually the opposite of the story. The story says very clearly from the get-go that Jesus knew who his sheep were. He knew that they would come. He knew he would call them. They would hear his voice. There was going to be no question. If there was even one that was astray, he would seek it out and call it. So the story from the beginning doesn't allow any room for theories like Joe Dirt Simpson and Jason Staplehead to get their arguments out of bed, right? People think so. People think that's the case because they're not thinking full circle. They're not taking everything into consideration. They're not allowing the foundational points that we know to mold their understanding of individual texts. So no, God was not taking the whale effect and swallowing everything in its path so that he could, nail or pinpoint the one that he was looking for. No, that's silly. That's not a very powerful God. That's not the God that this story projects or puts forth, right? This story's God is an all-powerful, mighty, sovereign God who's in control at all times, who knows his people at all times, who knows where they are at all times, who counts the hairs on their head at all times, who predestined them before the foundation of the world, who loved them before they did anything good or bad in the womb. That's the type of God this story projects. The type of God that Staples and Desperado Joe like to project is a very weak God, a God who lost control of the story, right? He lost control of his people. His people went far away and he lost sight of them. He had no, care for them. He did not plan to bring them back and call them back, which, by the way, is in like every passage in the Old Testament. That's the God that these guys are putting forth. So they have no arguments. There is absolutely no argument to be made that God saved multitudes of Gentiles for the purpose of saving Ephraim at the same time. It's a laughable, desperate attempt, plain and simple. Unless the Lord had left us a seed in this day, said Paul, we would have become like Sodom. So in other words, you can take the reverse of that and understand it to mean God left Israelites out there. They were out there. Okay? And of course, an even bigger problem for Desperado and Staples is that when the fullness of those Gentiles came in, all Israel would be saved. And we absolutely know without any shadow of a doubt that this mission had to be completed. It had to be fulfilled. The fullness of the nations had to have come in by the time of the coming, which was the destruction of the temple and the end of the age. We know that from many places. We could sit here and make a 2-hour-long video of just references that prove that. But one need not look any further than Matthew 24, verses 12 and 13. This gospel of the kingdom will go to all nations, folks. That's all Gentiles, folks. Same thing. Nations, Gentiles, ethnos. It'll go to all ethnos, and then the end will come. What end was that? That's right, the only end that the New Testament speaks of, that being the end that was fast approaching, that being the end that was the destruction of the temple, the end of the age, the end of the law, death, curse, and the inheritance of the promise. Folks, that's where I'm going to leave it. Short and sweet. If you liked it, give it a like a Ruski. If you're an Israelite messianic wannabe like Joe Desperado, take a hike a Ruski, and we'll catch you on that flip side. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.